My name is Tamsin Vidal, a news associate at the AFPC-USA. Today, I am speaking with Patrícia Vasconcellos, a foreign correspondent, award-winning documentarian, and member of the Association of Foreign Press Correspondents. Patrícia is the U.S. correspondent for the Brazilian TV network SBT. She received her master's in TV journalism at Goldsmiths College from the University of London and is a Chevening alumni. Hi, Patrícia. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Tamsin, thank you so much for having me. I also would like to thank the Association of Foreign Journalists in the US for this space, as such an important space, I think, to hear other colleagues from all over the world and exchange knowledge and thoughts about our greatest passion, journalism, right? It doesn't matter in which language we are writing or broadcasting to our countries, in my case, Portuguese, with a Brazilian accent.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. So, the first question I have is a bit about your history. So, you're from Brazil, and you also worked as a journalist in Argentina for some time. Could you describe how journalism works in those two countries, especially compared to the US, where you're based now?
Sure. Well, let's see. My perception is that the work itself, it's pretty much like the same. I mean, what describes journalism, in my case, broadcast journalism, as I work for TV. I have been doing this since I graduated, right? So what defines journalism, which is gather new events and translate to our audience. And from my perspective, this could be pretty much the same I doing in Brazil or Argentina or in the UK, where I did my master's following the rules of of journalism, right? Which is the headline, answering the questions when it happens, why it happens, what interferes, maybe, and that's then answering more directly your question. Of course, what is different is the environment. For example, what is the difficulty or how easy or how not easy it is to reach a source or an interviewee regarding official sources, and are you 100% free to really do your work? And regarding this, I've never faced any problems in my home country, never ever. But we know that there are difficulties that journalists face. They face all around the world. Recently, the NGO Reporters Without Borders, for example, released index, right, with a list of countries where journalists are more or less free. And regarding this, I have a little bit of experience in other countries in Latin America. I've covered as a correspondent for Latin America, different moments in Venezuela, for example. And there, in different years, the rules were not so clear of what we have to do in order to do freely our work in the streets. I was covering there, I was not based in Caracas, but I was traveling there very frequently from 2012 to 2018. Regarding Brazil, you asked about a comparison between Brazil journalism there and Argentina and United States. I believe that the way that we construct our package, then I'm talking about TV journalism, I feel that it is more likely the way that journalists, broadcaster journalists, they do here in United States. I mean, the way that we construct that we need to have a stand up always in the middle of the package. And while studying in the UK, doing my master's, I've realized that this is not a rule there. And the length, the time that the package, it is there. It's usually we have more time, and the way that is constructed, There, for example, you put the image first and then you write your text. Although, of course, when I'm doing my package and I'm on streets, of course, I'm thinking about the image that I am shooting because I do camera work too, or the cameraman is doing, and I pay attention and then I write the story. So the process is here in my head. Although in Brazil, we write the text first and then we put the image together, right? And regarding Argentina, I feel that there they love to discuss issues. They love to discuss politics, and and I felt very fascinated by the fact that in a daily basis, in any time, in any hour or of the day, you can find in the Argentinian television programs just to discuss politics without much production, maybe, but they are there talking for 1 hour, 2 hours, basically. So journalism has a huge space in the Argentinian media market comparing to my country. I think there are more space there.
And as a U.S. correspondent for a Latin American news organization, why do you think it's so important to educate citizens of Latin America of what's going on in the U.S.?
Everything that happens here impacts the world, right? Not only my country, but South America and Europe, and the decisions made here impact a lot. Now we're living a very tough moment in the whole world, right? Regarding COVID-19, and people from Brazil and other current countries that we are facing a difficult moment because we don't have yet vaccines for everybody. They are waiting, for example, other countries like United States. It doesn't, I'm conclude my thought first. They are waiting other countries like United States to give a word of when doses that will not be used here, for example, they could be sent to those countries in need. Just to give you an example, it doesn't mean that, for example, that's an obligation of other countries to do this, but that's the first fact that it comes into my mind of how it affects, right? What happens here, how it affects other countries. And we live in a world that everything is globalized, and an action that happens here, a decision that is it's made here, have a direct impact in public health, for example, while giving or not giving those doses. And this is a fact that we don't have an answer. Still nowadays, we know that, for example, that the government from the United States, they gave some doses for Canada and Mexico, and might give some doses to other countries, but they didn't answer yet which countries are those. So in politics, in economy, and to have a voice from here is different when you are in your country reporting, reading the agencies, and writing your text from São Paulo or from Rio de Janeiro is different when you are in the place. So you have your perspective, you have your feelings, you also have your voice because you can make questions. So that's why I believe it's so important to be abroad reporting for your home country.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned a bit earlier, you are a broadcast journalist.
Yeah.
Can you explain what the biggest difference between broadcast and written journalism, and where they kind of meet are very similar? And why did you choose to focus on broadcast journalism?
I think both types of journalists, they meet because the purpose is the same, right? To inform society of what is happening. The difference is that the way that it's done, it's different. To be honest, I've always worked in television, and before television, I was doing radio. So answering your second question, I've chosen TV because when I was very young, a child, I was working as a radio speaker, radio presenter in a radio station in my home town, because my father, he was doing this. So I got his influence. And so I knew that I wanted to continue to do this job. Although I was very passionate about radio, I still do radio nowadays. But at that time, with 17 years old, I thought that I could be, how can I say, financially more independent working for television, to be honest. And that's why I chose to get into the TV market in Brazil. And that was, I believe, the first big challenge I had after leaving college, because in Brazil, journalism is a choice that you can make in the college. It's a BA. In many countries, it's not, right. In the UK, for example, it's not. You can make an MA in journalism, as I did, but not a graduate course. So that's why I chose to be a broadcaster in TV. And the differences are the shape itself. Like in television, we have less time to tell the same story that in a newspaper. You have more space, or maybe, yes, more space to describe the event and explain. One of the biggest challenges I face is tell, for example, complex stories in 3 minutes or 2 minutes and a half. And so this is a challenge, the way that it's done.
Mm-hmm. And as a documentarian, you're kind of, you're behind the scenes, but you're also on the camera.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about choosing what shots you want to include, or knowing when's a good moment to pick up your camera and record something?
I believe it's a feeling. I believe very much in our own feeling. When you were reporting events that you don't schedule, for example, an interview, events that are happening randomly. So how do you choose where to go? For example, when I was covering the Black Lives Matter protests last year here in New York, that's when I did that documentary, Curfew in New York City. It's an event that is happening everywhere. So you need to choose in one moment. Am I going to stay in Brooklyn, or should I go to Manhattan? This is one thing, right? Which way should I go? This is a decision that you do while on the field. It's a decision that is made in that moment. That's why I believe it's a feeling. I follow my feeling, and that was developed, I believe, with experience. Of course, nowadays, after 20 years of doing the same thing, I believe that I'm more prepared to deal with those type of situations while on the streets. And how to choose the best image, again, I think it's what it touches me more. So again, I believe in that feeling that I have, what touches me more regarding image, right? And interviews, while sending to Brazil, if we have time, I usually send the raw material, the full length of the full interview. So my editor, who is working with me, he can choose. I have a little dog, and he wants to come here. I don't know. His name is Uli. You see, he's Argentinian. He speaks Spanish.
He's so precious. He's absolutely
working.
welcome to be in this interview.
Okay, so Uli, todo bien. It's this morning shift. He's looking.
Yeah.
So how to choose the image? So I believe it's what it touches more, and what it could describe the message that which image describes better what is happening at that moment, right? So your question is valuable. What is a strong image and what is not a strong image, right? When we're thinking about how should I start this package, what is the best image that I have in order to start? So I can have an opinion, and maybe you can have another opinion. But what I think it's great, it's when we're working, then when I'm working for SBT, for example, usually we have the same opinions, which means, me and the editors. So it means that there is a coincidence of thoughts of what is good or what might not be so good to use.
And you actually touched upon a bit the next question I had for you, which is about
Okay.
your documentary that you recently released, Curfew and NYC, which, for those who don't know, is a film that covered the Black Lives Matter protests in New York City last summer after the death of George Floyd. So, what was that experience like?
It was very intense, of course, as it was for every journalist that was covering that event, not only in New York but in other cities in the United States. Um, it was, yes, very intense, and I was doing the coverage of the events, the for the main news program in SBT Brazil. So I was going live daily, in a daily basis, plus doing packets every day. And at that time, I didn't have the idea of doing a documentary. So I was on the streets shooting and interviewing people in order to do my packets, as I said. But then after the end of that week, when the curfew was suspended, I had a feeling, Tamsin, when I was going trying to sleep, that I had not delivered the whole picture. And I also found that I had a lot of footage, extra footage, and interviews that we couldn't broadcast fully in in Brazil, because we have a limited time, right? In our news programs. So I felt that I felt that I had a commitment with those people that I found on the streets in that such difficult moment, because we were still living. That was the first week of June, so New York was completely closed, empty, and suddenly George Floyd was murdered, and everybody was out on the streets. And so it was a dangerous moment regarding COVID. The risk of getting infected was a very high. It was high. So we had those two events: the COVID and plus the protests. So it was a matter of commitment that I felt as a journalist to give voice to them in a way that the interviews could be used in a as they talk to me, not edit. And so I spoke with my the editor in chief in São Paulo. So I said, look, I have this idea. We have so much material. I really would like to do a documentary using this, but then but in another shape, in another format. The documentary is my voiceover. I'm talking in Portuguese. And basically I'm telling how it was to cover the events following chronological order, right? So what I was doing when before everything started, where we were. And so she said, okay, let me talk with our director in São Paulo too. And he said, okay, great, let's do it. So I am very grateful that they bought this idea, and it was a work team. We made this together, and I'm very grateful that we were able to finalize this work.
It's a very beautiful film.
You watch it? I
Yes,
sent you the link.
yes, I loved it. It was very, I think, very impactful, especially in regards to what it was covering. I think it did it justice. Uh, you've mentioned in the past that covering these protests kind of reminded you of being a journalist in Latin America. I was wondering if you could delve into that a bit more and what you meant by that.
Oh, yes, I said to you this, right? Yes, because when I was about to leave my home to cover the protests, again, I was coming from the coverage of the COVID here in New York, and I've never covered, I believe no journalist ever did, right? That type of situation that it makes personal life with news, because I was so afraid of going outside, to be honest. But even in March, April, I was on the streets every day recording the field hospital and in Central Park and the emergency place in hospitals in Brooklyn. And I was already in that mood that, okay, I'm in a different type of coverage, so let's keep going. And that was 1 month doing that. Then the protests came. And when I organized it myself to go out and do my job, New York had lived a moment of a lot of riots that happened in one night, and many NYPD cars were burned. And it was a chaotic night. And then it happened for the second night. Then I called again, the editor-in-chief in São Paulo. That was a Sunday, one day before the curfew was declared in New York. So I said, that was Sunday. I said, look, the situation here, it's getting more intense. I don't know what is going to happen, but I believe we must be prepared. And so she go, be prepared. I mean, like to be with the cameraman since very early in the day. And also I request a driver. And when I left home, I remember I thought I need to be well identified, because when you're covering riots and you were a press, it's if you're in a war zone, you were, for example, with the militaries. So you were you know your place, that you were from one side. But when you're covering a random event on the streets, protest, you don't know who can come and where the threat could come. You must be well identified. So luckily I had a vest which says press, huge press on the back, on my here, and also have a Brazilian flag here, which I think it's important to show that where are you, because in the middle of the event, they look and they, oh, they are journalists. And so in that sense, that remind me riots and events that I covered in Latin America. I was in Caracas in 2014, 1 year after Maduro got elected. And that was a very difficult year in Venezuela. Riots happened in different places in Caracas. And in one night, I had a problem that I got stuck, for example, on the top of a building for almost 2 hours, because I was covering a riot in a square, and the security forces came throwing tear gases, and I didn't have mask at that moment. And I did something very wrong, which is I run with all the crowd. So I was in the middle with them, and and my cameraman ran toward the other side. Mm-hmm. So that's why I got stuck in this building, waiting the situation get more calm. And that reminded me because I was in New York, and I believe that no journalist would expect to cover an ongoing event of riots in New York. So might not have for example, helmets and a vest and a mask. I didn't have a mask to protect in case of tear gases. And I didn't know if it would be necessary, how the police would respond. So that was a issue also when I was on the streets at night during curfew time, because I didn't know, would the police respond? Should I stay or should I? Because I didn't know. I had no previous experience while covering those events, this type of events in New York. So, but answering, I spoke a lot, right? But it's that's how remembered me, because I thought that it could be very similar of covering those events in Latin America. So luckily, I had a one helmet that I gave to the cameraman. It's one that I keep with me, and so he uses it all the time.
I think it's so vital that you mentioned the importance of making sure, as the press in these situations, you are properly identified, and you make sure of that, because as we've seen across all these protests this past year, that a lot of press were arrested and detained for doing their jobs. And
exactly, I remember, and I saw a crew of CNN in another city where George, I don't know where that crew was, but anyway, I had those images and that events in my head. And so, of course, I was concerned because I didn't know how, I didn't know if I mean, it's hard to say this, but it's true. It's how I felt. I didn't know if, although we were essential workers and we had the right to be on the streets, I didn't know if my rights would be respected. It's hard to say that, but it's not, I'm not saying this because I have experienced a situation that my rights were violated. It was not that. I had that feeling when I was on the streets because I didn't know what could happen because I just didn't know. And you saw the documentary in one moment. It was the first night of curfew in New York City. I was filming near Soho and a policeman shouted saying, get off the streets. It's illegal to be out there here. Okay, it was illegal for the big majority of people, but we journalists, we were part of a small group of professionals that we were allowed to be outside working, right? At that moment, I had a feeling of I didn't reply. I just said, okay. And I came back and I entered in our car. I could have said, no, I'm not leaving. I'm a journalist. Here is my identification. I'm doing my job. But to be honest, my reaction was to protect myself and protect the crew, protect the cameraman and the driver. And so I thought, I didn't think actually. I just answered that, and I came back to the car, and then he came back to in our car to shake my hand. He didn't say sorry, but he said, "I need to be direct. The events that happened here in the few hours ago, the streets are not safe. Go home." Again, I just said okay, and then we left, and we continued to work. But that was my instinct. Again, that's how I managed the situation.
And that event is actually shown in your documentary. For those watching and who would like to check it out, is there a place they can view it?
Oh, great. Yes, actually, it could be watched in Brazil in the YouTube channel that belongs to SBT, the TV network I work for. But I'm gonna see with them if there is a way that we can broadcast here in the US. So we might put a link and in our interview, and I'll let you know.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Oh, but then there's gonna be a screening, and I'm so excited about that next Sunday, May 9th.
Oh,
The documentary was chosen to be part of a group of of productions, short documentaries, to be screened as part of an event organized by New York Movie Awards because the work won some recognitions last year, and so this event is going to be this Sunday in a theater in the East Village. So I'm very
wow.
grateful for that.
Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Yes, it is. It is. I'm very excited to be there and to see the work and the reaction of everybody. Yeah.
Is that a public or private event?
It's a private event, so the filmmakers who made the other works that is gonna be screened, they're gonna be there, and we could invite two people only due COVID restrictions. So because COVID, it needs to be like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely update the AFC website if it does become available in the US and other countries, so
I
viewers can.
appreciate and say thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's important, right, to spread the message.
Yeah, absolutely. And so before we run out of time today, do you have any last messages or advice you want to give for all the future foreign correspondents or new foreign correspondents just starting out in the field?
Well, never give up. When I was preparing here, the camera and my telephone, I thought, oh, okay, I'm talking to them. Yes, I'm here in the United States, broadcasting for Brazil. That was my dream in one moment, and so it was not easy, of course. And so what I believe is to believe in yourselves and seek advice with people you admire. I always do this till nowadays. Till nowadays, I remember when I was younger, I was in the college, and I was looking professionals that I admired at time, the way that they used to write, and somehow I tried to get in touch with them. And nowadays it's so much easier, right? 20 years ago, we didn't have Twitter, and so it was more difficult to reach those people. So nowadays, you might reach using LinkedIn or Twitter, and you might have your an answer or an advice, and I think it's very valuable. And I would like to use this space to thank again Thanos for the invitation. Thank you very much. As I said, I think it's very, very important, this space that the association opened, and because then we can listen to each other and exchange knowledge, and it's so rich, it's so important. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Patricia, so much for speaking with me today.
Okay, great experience. A huge kiss. In Portuguese, beijo, which means kisses.
I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay,
Bye bye.
bye bye.